Well, hello, everyone. Here we are after what we might call a tumultuous week. And we have had our own storm this week. And as far as we know, we all survived well.
Yes.
And it's important that we journey through this together. Some of us were really battered around, and most of us escape very lightly, but we are still in this together. And there's this notion of, well, we shouldn't be afraid, but we should trust in God. But really, we're human, and we are afraid, even though ultimately that trust is still there. And we experience and share that through each other and with each other. So how did you fare, Annette?
Well, I do feel a little bit guilty because I was on holiday up in Echuca, and in Echuca we didn't really have the storm at all to the extent that it was down here. I mean, it rained and it was windy, but nothing like what happened back here at home. So it was with some trepidation that John and I drove back, because we have 4 quite big trees in the manse here. And wondered what we might find. And really our first sort of sight of anything was driving down from Tooborac to Lancefield, and on the road there we could see the devastation that had happened, and yes, wondered what would happen when we got home. But things here were fine. We'd lost our nature strip tree pretty much, and that was it. So, yes, but yeah, with all sorts of stories of all sorts of things that have happened. We lost power. We didn't have power till Friday afternoon, I think it was, but we were able to find somewhere safe and warm to sleep. So we did okay, really. But it does shake us up, doesn't it? It does. One of the things that's happening in Romsey and Lancefield is that the neighbourhood houses are organising a meeting this week to talk about, okay, so we've had a little bit of a sort of a test run, and it wasn't for too long and things didn't go too badly, but we couldn't communicate. That phones weren't working, people didn't have power to charge their phones, even if the phone system had been working. In a situation like that, how does the community know what to do and where help is available and who is in the most need and all of those kind of things? So it's been a little bit of a wake-up call, which is not a bad thing.
And as we've listened to radios and seen the TV, we've heard people's reaction to that. Well, no one's been here. We feel isolated and neglected. And then another group is saying exactly the same thing, and another group is saying the same thing. And then people like me who really had absolute minimal damage except for a garden shrub or two, we're told to stay away, don't get in the way, stay off the roads. And so there's this real conflict of what do we do for each other? How do we help each other? And it's that sharing the journey.
And it's in the time now when it's fresh in our minds, and we remember what happened, and that we might be thinking about, well, if this was to happen again, what would be a good thing to do, isn't it, that we need to think about it?
How can our communications be better prepared when we're so reliant on power and cables and yes.
So a real storm in the week when we're looking at the story of Jesus asleep in the boat in the middle of a storm and his worried and afraid disciples.
Yes.
So very timely. Yeah.
I was interested in listening to the By the Well podcast and the linkages between the 2 passages that they made. That's the Samuel passage for this week, and the Mark passage was the notion of liminal space, that space in between things.
Yes.
And that the Sea of Galilee was the space between the 2 lands where the storm was, and the giant of Gath stood in the liminal space between the two armies.
Yes.
And yes, I found that really interesting. And how often are we standing in that liminal space, the space in between?
Well, we shy away from it, I think. I know I do. I mean, who likes conflict and who likes chaos? You know, we'd like to think that things are coasting along and we're under control and it's all good. But it's also the chaos is the space, and the liminal space is where things happen, aren't they? And they're places of encounter with the out of the ordinary, and that's what God is, isn't it? God is out of the ordinary. And even, you know, the first words of Genesis are about the chaos of the waters and the Spirit hovering over them. It's ripe for something to happen, isn't it? That kind of space.
Yes. And one commentary I read this week suggested that Jesus also was a cause of some chaos in different situations, and that when God's kingdom seeks to turn the world upside down, it creates chaos.
Yes, that's right. And not just with Jesus turning over the tables in the temple. No. He challenged all kinds of things and offended all kinds of people and upturned all kinds of other things before he got to the temple, didn't he?
Yes. So it's a very opportune readings for this week, really.
Yes, that's right. I did say to people it'd be good to read all the way through 1st and 2nd Samuel, and we've kind of, in that reading, we've leapt a fair way ahead of where we were last week. And there's David, and I think David too is kind of in that sort of a space, even beyond this story with Goliath. He's made king, he's anointed king at one point, but Saul is still king at that point. And you know, so what happens? Who is the king? Where's the authority? What happens? And you know, there's all of this uncertainty in the story that is part of David becoming the person who he becomes, for good or ill, you know. And I think that constant to and fro between, is David really a good guy? Who is this person? What is his character? That gives us a place to ask questions about ourselves and about our communities and about who we are as people of God as well.
And it must have created a certain amount of confusion. I won't go so far as to call it chaos, but confusion with the people who were around David and worked with him and were in his army and in his household. It would certainly have been, I think, quite a confusing time.
Yes, and in Saul's household as well, because, of course, Saul's son Jonathan is very good friends with David. And where is his loyalty in all of that, you know, to his father or his friends? So it's not a nice, easy, pleasant story. And even this story about Goliath, there are questions around it, aren't there?
Yes.
Yes. So other places in the Bible that suggest that it wasn't David who killed Goliath, that it was someone else entirely. And just good to be kept on our toes, I think, and to not think that everything is easy and settled and comfortable, but asking the right questions is a good way.
And we tend to visit that David and Goliath story as a separate little parcel. Some of us learned about David and Goliath at Sunday school, and we so often just leave it there in the Sunday school box, if you like. Yeah. But it's good to revisit it and think it through again and see it in a somewhat different light.
Yeah. It is also good to remember, you know, what we did learn in Sunday school about that story, which was that God is on the side of the underdog. And, you know, there's Goliath, huge and boastful, it seems, and challenging, you know, and David tries on Saul's armour and it doesn't fit and it's uncomfortable. He's not used to wearing armour, and he just, in his simplicity, with the skills that he's acquired in just his day-to-day life of what he's been doing. That's what he uses, the gifts that God has given him to be the person that he is what he needs in this situation to go and be God's person, the person that God has called. And I think they're good messages as well.
Yes, it's almost as a coming of age story of David, from the shepherd boy brought in from the sheep, yet confident in his ability and his skills to face the world, if you like, this big giant Goliath.
Yes.
I just never thought about it as a coming of age story.
Yeah, and I'm intrigued by the bits of the story that the lectionary leaves out, where there's talk about a reward for whoever goes and slays this giant. And David is very interested in this. There are 3 little bits, all in one section, where he keeps asking, so what will you get if you kill the giant? He's very interested in this reward, and one of his brothers tells him off about it. So what are his motives? It is a question that we might want to ask. And he answers that, like, when his brother tells him off, he answers like any sort of teenage boy. Oh, no, I was only asking a question. It's almost like that. So yes, he's sort of like this teenage boy, but steps up to the moment, doesn't he? Yeah.
One of the things that I found caught me up by surprise, Annette, in the podcast this week was the comment that of drawing a parallel between the giant and COVID, and saying COVID is like the unseen giant, and that it's okay to be fearful of this, but we join in partnership with God to journey both with God and with each other through this storm, if you like to call it a storm. Yes, I found that quite helpful, actually.
Yes, and all sorts of things that we face that might be unseen, and there are huge things in people's lives, difficulties and dangers, and yes, it is okay to be afraid. I did like the point that they made in the podcast about Jesus wasn't rebuking the disciples; he was rebuking the wind and the waves.
Yes.
But he wasn't sort of saying to the disciples, "Oh, you've got no faith." He was maybe reminding them, "Come on, you've been through difficult things before.
Yes.
Where's your faith?" Sort of thing.
And that we enter into partnership with each other as well as with God to get through these storms of life, if you want to call them.
That's right. And that's the beauty of community, isn't it? Because sometimes my faith will ebb, because I've been through this and this and this, but you might be there, Meg, to say, well, God's there, Annette, hang in there or whatever. And we do that for each other, don't we?
Yes, we do.
That's the beauty of a community of faith. That I like the servant song, I will hold the Christ light for you in the nighttime of your fear, because we do that for each other. Sometimes when I've dropped the ball, someone else will carry it for me while it's too difficult for me.
Yes, and I'm sure we can all think of many examples when others have done that for each of us.
Yes. So
we get our turn to respond.
Yeah. So fear and despair are not signs that we have no faith.
No.
Are they?
No.
That can be part of it. So let's go into our week hoping that the storms we face might not be quite as violent and real as the ones that we faced this week.
Yes.
But that we remember that Christ is asleep within our boat.
Yes.
Whipped by winds, but still afloat.
Yes.
Thank you, Miriam Therese Winter, for those words.
I saw Christ in wind and thunder, joy